I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? Boogie2988 coming at you live once again through the power of the internet. And if you're a fellow Star Wars fan, you're probably going to agree with the title of this video. EA, it's time to stop. Specifically, it's time for EA to just realize that they cannot do Star Wars justice, and either they need to willingly give up the exclusive contract they have with Disney to make Star Wars video games, or Disney needs to take it away from them at this point. Honestly, I don't really care how it happens at this point. It just has to happen. Last night, as I'm laying in bed trying to sleep, I saw this tweet from Kotaku, and it looks like EA has canceled their open world Star Wars game. And this is a problem for a lot of different reasons. The biggest problem is that this canceled Star Wars game is the leftovers from a previously canceled Star Wars game. You remember back in 2017, Visceral Entertainment, who's made some really amazing games, was working on a decent, narrative-driven, single-player Star Wars game. And then out of nowhere, EA canceled that game and shut down Visceral entirely. And look, not only was that game being developed by Visceral Studios, that game was being headed up by the lead developer of the first 3 Uncharted games. This was going to be the Star Wars take on Uncharted. That was going to be an amazing game, but they canceled it because they wanted to create something. Let me quote them here. In its current form, it was shaping up to be a story-based linear adventure game. Throughout the development process, we have been testing the game concept with players, listening to the feedback about what and how they want to play, and closely tracking fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we needed to pivot the design. Now, for those of you who don't speak EA, also known as corporate doublespeak, also known as bullshit, let me translate that for you. We couldn't figure out how to stick a buttload of microtransactions in it and turn it into a live service, so since it wasn't going to make billions of dollars, we decided to cancel it. Basically, they wanted it to become an open world game, a nice big, fully developed game, probably games as a service with an online mode and a competitive mode that you could buy loot boxes and microtransactions and cosmetics, because basically, as EA said, single-player games were dead back in 2017. There's no way a single-player game could survive in this market. Actually, 2018 was a bit of a renaissance for single-player games, and EA could have been a part of that. Whether it was The Amazing Spider-Man, or Red Dead Redemption 2, or God of War, or any other amazing single-player experience, they could have been a part of that. You should have been part of that. Star Wars should have been part of that. I mean, if we're not getting good Star Wars movies, we should at least get good Star Wars video games. Am I right? So they decided a single-player, linear game with, narrow hallways, things along that lines, wasn't going to work out for the Star Wars franchise, and decided that this game should be open world instead, because that hasn't been done to death. But unfortunately, the execs over at EA, I think it had to be multiple execs, because it seems like one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, but they did not realize that that kind of game, an open world game, would take time to develop, so they've decided to cancel this iteration of it as well. Jason Schreier over at Kotaku, after publishing the article, updated it with this. He said, when EA's top decision makers looked at the roadmap for the next few years, they decided that they needed something earlier than the planned release date for Orca, according to 2 people familiar with what had happened. So they canceled Orca in favor of a smaller scale Star Wars project that's now aimed for much sooner, likely late 2020, which also happens to be around the time that I've heard next generation consoles will launch. Something smaller in scope. I don't know, maybe single player. Maybe we won't even make it open world. Maybe we'll make it, linear in nature. And maybe we'll let a really great studio like Visceral head it up. Like the game you were developing back in 2017 that you shit-canned, EA. Seriously. If they had been working on that game this whole time, of course it would have been ready for the 23 release. You might have been able to release it this year. Visceral would still be open. People would still have their jobs, and we would have a good single-player game to play alongside our Spider-Mans, our Red Deads, and our God of Wars, with a Star Wars name on it. We'd have at least one good Star Wars thing. And this just shows a certain amount of incompetence from the execs over at EA. Not the developers, because the developers do an amazing job, for the most part, given the constraints that the executives put on them. And I got nothing but love for the people who've developed the Star Wars games. But it certainly doesn't look like EA knows what they're doing with the Star Wars license, and it's time for them to willingly relinquish it for someone who does. Look at this tweet that was tweeted by a creator by the name of Jedi Spectre 117. Star Wars games over a 4-year period under LucasArts and any other company, 2002 to 2006. Look at these incredible games that were released under the Star Wars license, including Knights of the Old Republic and the original Battlefront games. And then under EA, we have Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, and it's now 2019. And other than, a mobile app or two, we've got nothing else to show for it. EA, come on. And if you live under a rock, by the way, this first Battlefront game looked like it was going to be good. Got like a 70% at Metacritic, a pretty average score. Got about a 0.0 when it came to the user score, though, and for good reason, because the game was pretty much not fleshed out and did not have a lot of content and was games as a service personified. But when it came to the second Battlefront, that game was so poorly monetized and so poorly done. Not the art, not the gameplay or anything else, but the loot boxes in that game actually became a matter of national discussion, worldwide discussion, and actually got lawmakers involved in shutting down loot boxes in video games. And it all is because of what a disaster Battlefront 2 was. So not very good games, is what I'm trying to say. And look, if I were Disney, I would take away this license no matter what the cost was, okay? Disney can afford to take a hit. I know they signed an exclusivity contract with EA that was 4 or 5, 6 years ago. I'm sure that's got to terminate eventually. Terminate it early, okay? It is an embarrassment what they are doing to your franchise. I mean, it's pretty similar to what you guys are doing too with the movie, so maybe that's the plan overall. Maybe it's to tank the franchise, but hopefully not, because even if the movies suck, the video games can still be good. But not this, Disney, right? You don't want this representing your franchise, do you? Do you? Come on. To put it in terms that the folks over at Disney may be able to understand, EA is Rian Johnson, okay? And it's time to give it to any other director at this point. Any other director other than Rian Johnson, okay? You need to find your Joss Whedon. You need to find your J.J. Abrams, okay? And I don't even care who you pick at this point. It could be Ubisoft. It could be Bethesda, for God's sakes. Give it to Activision at this point. They can't do worse. Now, there is still hope for Star Wars fans about getting a good video game, maybe sometime this generation or early in the next. The folks over at Respawn Entertainment, the incredibly talented people over at Respawn, are working on a third-person single-player action-adventure game called Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, where you play a Jedi Padawan during the Imperial era, which takes place right after Revenge of the Sith. And the game has been pitched as dark and set during the downfall of the Jedi, who are consequently being hunted down as a result. EA, please don't cancel this game too. Let this be your launch title for the next generation, please. So EA, I'm sure you only have a couple of years left on this license anyway. This is pretty much your last chance to get it right. Our patience is wearing thin. I know that's not actually from the movies. It's from a video game. But Darth Vader still says it. But Disney, listen to reason. Please understand that your movie franchise is failing, okay? And if you want to keep the Star Wars franchise alive, you need to do it through video games. And some good video games will not only get me to spend money and enjoy your product, it will keep the franchise alive in my minds, in minds of a lot of other gamers, and the minds of a lot of kids who play video games right now. And I'm telling you, Battlefront was not that. Galaxy of Heroes is definitely not that. Trust me, you guys can do better. You gotta do better. Please do better. But that's just one man's opinion. I could be wrong, and I know that if I am, you're gonna let me know in the comments section below. I'm sure I've upset a lot of Star Wars fans, a lot of Battlefront fans. I know there's 3 of them or so in the world, and probably a few folks at EA. And again, if you work on these video games, EA, if you work for EA, if you were a developer of those video games, I got nothing but love for you. I know that you guys are doing the best that you can do given the constraints that EA gives you. It's up to EA to make the right decisions, and clearly they're not. Guys, as always, thanks for watching. I love you very much, and I'll speak with you again soon.